assistant instead of Sally Shanahan this morning, who thought that going to the beach was a better offer on Easter Sunday. Go figure. Some of us are bringing our best selves to this space, and some of us are bringing our struggling selves, including pieces we might be ashamed of. All of us are welcome here, and all of us are loved. Some of us have open hearts, and some of us aren't quite there yet because our hearts have gotten a little beat up this week, and we might have forgotten how to trust and open. Your heart is welcome here, no matter how bruised. You are welcome among us. All of us are imperfect, but we're here to drop our defenses and trust that what happens in worship is powerful and life-changing. Together, we affirm that this day and our being together can make each of us braver, more compassionate, and wiser than when we woke up this morning. You are welcome here. Pardon me. In regard to today's service, the Easter moment, looking up at Jesus's body hanging from the cross, Peter famously realized that Jesus lived on in Peter's own life and the lives of other disciples. He was not dead. It was for Peter what the late Bishop Spong calls the original Easter moment. This morning, we explore what that might mean for us these 2,000 years later. And to provide this service, we welcome again Reverend John Manwell and Reverend Phyliss Hubbell back into our pulpit. We are grateful to both of you, as well as Reverend Cindy Terlazzo, for pausing your covenant so that you could return to us on this special Easter Sunday. Thank you both for being here.
Let me say to start how good it is to be back with you. We bring you Easter greetings from Gaithersburg to Gettysburg. It is wonderful to see old friends, new faces. Our opening words this morning are from Mark 16. On the first day of the week, they came at early dawn to the tomb, saying, "Who will roll away the stone from the entrance?" They looked up and saw that the stone had already been rolled back, and on the right they saw a young man. They were alarmed, but the man said to them, "Why do you seek the living among the dead?" So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing, for they were afraid.
Not just those of you who are here in this room, but those of you who are here virtually as well. We are just delighted to be with you on such a wonderful, beautiful morning with the flowers in bloom, and we were actually up to see a little bit of the sunrise this morning. I want to share with you a story this morning called Chicken Sunday by one of our very favorite authors, Patricia Polacca. I want to share with you the reason why I chose this. There are actually two. First, many years ago, my great nephew, Bobby, gave us these two elaborate Easter eggs that he had made for us. He must have been, I don't know, say 10 or 12 or something like that. But we were really touched to get these. It meant a lot to us. Sadly, Bobby died young, and looking at these eggs brings his loving heart back to me and keeps him alive in my own heart. Second, Betty, you mentioned Ukrainians. Ukrainians have a special kind of Easter egg called Pisanki eggs, and they're not ones that we see all the time, but they're really gorgeous, intricate eggs. They're beautiful, somewhat like Bobby's. The story I want to share you with this morning honors both Bobby and the brave people of Ukraine. It's a true story, it actually happened, called Chicken Sunday. Polacco writes that Miss Eula always welcomed her to join her grandsons for Sunday dinner and for Sunday church if she wanted to. They would walk to church, and each time they would go to church, they'd walk by Mr. Kadinsky's hat shop. Miss Eula always pointed out there was one hat that she thought was the most beautiful hat, and she knew she couldn't afford it, but still she could sit and enjoy how beautiful it was. The children decided to ask Mr. Kadinsky if they could earn some money by doing chores in his store. But before they could get the words out, some boys ran past and threw raw eggs at Mr. Kadinsky's door. It wasn't us, the children said, but Mr. Kadinsky wouldn't listen. He was sure that they had done it, and he called their Miss Eula and complained to her about her children. But she believed the children when they denied it. So Patricia and her friends decided to decorate some eggs for Easter and give them to Mr. Kadinsky to show him that they really were good kids and they would not have done something so mean. They put them in a basket and brought them to Mr. Kadinsky. "Pysanky eggs," he exclaimed. "I haven't sent these since I left my homeland in Ukraine many years ago." "We didn't throw those eggs at your door," said the children. "Well, then, you have some chutzpah to be here, some courage. Come in and have some tea with me." And so they went in and they talked, and they told him why they had come. "It's almost Easter," he said. "Why don't you set up a table in my shop and you can sell these eggs to the people who come in? I'll bet they will be a hit." And indeed, they almost went viral. They were... They sold them in a day, all of them. And when they counted the money, they had just enough to buy the hat. But just then, Mr. Kadinsky came into the shop with a box already gift wrapped. He had realized what they wanted to do, and he gave it to the children for Miss Eula. When she got up on Easter Sunday, they gave her the box with a hat in it, and she burst into tears. When it was time for her solo at church, her voice sounded just like slow thunder and sweet rain. Miss Eula died a long time ago. Patricia Polacco and her friends are grown up, but they still think very often about Miss Eula and the Pysanky eggs. Even today, Polacco says when she gets really quiet inside, she can hear her singing, a voice that sounds like slow thunder and sweet rain. Miss Eula comes alive again in their hearts. Resurrection in our time. Jan Richardson is an artist, a writer, and an ordained minister in the United Methodist Church. She serves as director of the Wellspring Studio, LLC, and has traveled widely as a retreat leader and conference speaker. I read this poem on Facebook, and I said, "John, you have to listen to this." She writes, "You hardly imagine standing here. Everything you ever loved suddenly returned to you, looking you in the eye and calling your name. And now you do not know how to abide this hole in the center of your chest, where a door slams shut and swings open at the same time, turning on the hinge of your aching and hopeful heart. I tell you, this is not a banishment from the garden. This is an invitation, a choice, a threshold, a gate. This is your life calling to you from a place you could never have dreamed, but now that you have glimpsed its edge, you cannot imagine choosing any other way. So let the tears come at this anointing as consecration, and then let them go. Let this blessing gather itself around you. Let it give you what you will need for this journey. You will not remember the words. They do not matter. All you need to remember is how it sounded when you stood in the place of death and heard the living call your name. And this is called the Magdalene's blessing. Our meditation this morning draws from the words of Reverend Sarah Morris Campbell, a Unitarian Universalist minister and colleague. They appear in number 628 in your hymnal if you want to follow along.
We begin, in the tomb of the soul, we carry secret yearnings, pains, frustrations, loneliness, tears, regrets, and worries.
In the tomb of the soul, we take refuge from the world and its heaviness.
In the tomb of the soul, we wrap ourselves in the security of darkness.
Sometimes this is a comfort. Sometimes it is an escape.
Sometimes it prepares us for the experience. Sometimes it insulates us from life.
Sometimes this tomb life gives us time to feel the pain of the world and reach out to heal others. Sometimes it numbs us and locks us up with our own concerns.
In the season when the light and the dark balance the day, we seek balance for ourselves.
Grateful for the darkness that has nourished us, we push away the stone and invite the light to awaken us to the possibilities within us and among us. Possibilities for new life in ourselves and in our world.
I've been a Unitarian all my life, since way back before the merger with the Universalists. As a child, I joined in decorating Easter eggs, searching for them. In church, I'd be inspired by some of the most beautiful music ever written. And later in the choir, I would join in singing it. In the choir or not, I remember every Sunday coming to church with a heightened sense of awareness, sense of perhaps expectation. The story of Easter fascinated me. Always I would wonder how the minister would handle the story of the resurrection. What would the minister say? How might I experience the Easter moment? What might it mean for me, and how does it challenge me to live? Now, as the minister, what am I going to say? Easter celebrates the life of Jesus and Jesus' resurrection after his death on the cross. Most of us as Unitarian Universalists have doubts about the resurrection. We question the concept, but if there was no resurrection, what might Easter be? How might Easter be special for us? Easter has always been a high point of my religious life, my religious year, and I want to tell you why. For me, Easter is about the possibility of ongoing transformation of our lives, mine and yours together. We seldom talk about heaven, to be sure, much less about hell. Of course, that couldn't be a concern for you or me. But Easter for most of us isn't really about an otherworldly heaven or hell. I think many of us come to church at Easter not so much out of any expectation of discovering the secret of getting to heaven as to discover the secret of making the world we live in a little more like heaven. Making life like heaven here on earth, allowing us somehow to live our lives more fully in a spirit of love. Finding that hope is the Easter moment for us. We come seeking hope, hope for our own lives and hope for the world. God knows the world needs all the hope. Rationalist you that I am, still I admit that I recognize this longing in my own life, as you can tell. And I know that we all do. In that sense, I too come to church in search of heaven. Some of you will remember the late Bishop Spong, John Shelby Spong, an Episcopal bishop known for his liberal theology. His little book, The Easter Moment, has inspired this sermon. In it, he speaks of the Apostle Peter's sense when he was standing at the foot of the cross, looking at Jesus' body. Peter, Spong says, must have recognized that Jesus' death was not the result of God's anger and punishment. Rather, it was part of Jesus' own plan. Thus, at that moment, says Spong, Peter too was resurrected to new life, becoming a new being. He saw life in a new way, with all of its depth and wonder, its transcendence and ecstasy, and that change opened his eyes. With those newly opened eyes, Peter saw the resurrected Jesus alive. And I wonder, do you and I at some deep level not hope that every Sunday when we go to church for some such transformation in the way we see the world? Perhaps it's every preacher's secret hope to inspire just such longing. Could this be what it means for us to experience resurrection? I can't speak for you, of course, but for me, it's just the sort of longing and the chance to share it with you that brings me to church. I think it's the ultimate reason why the church exists. The ultimate purpose of the church, I think, is to give us hope, to bring us hope, perhaps even to transform our lives, and through us to bring hope to the world. This transformation may culminate in some dramatic realization here in the pews, but in our church, we don't stress that as much as helping to make it a beginning of change in our lives. The change begins perhaps as we come to church in the first place, gathering our courage, tiptoeing in, sitting in the back, of course, late, maybe, so nobody will notice. Certainly you and I as Unitarian Universalists are not coming to church in search of resurrection. Not literally, at least. I can't even think of the last time I used the word. I think we come to church in search of hope. The secret hope that when we leave, we'll somehow feel different, more wrapped up in a spirit of love when we go back out. I think we come out of hope, often a buried hope of change. I couldn't always have said this. For me, it was Ken McLean who put it into words. Some of you will know that name. He was for many years the minister of the Cedar Lane Church in Bethesda, Maryland. I interned with him as I started out in ministry more than 20 years ago. One evening, gathered with a circle of participants in a newcomers class, I can remember someone asking Ken what he thought was the purpose of the church. Ken pondered. And then he finally said, I think the purpose of the church is to bring hope into our lives and into the world. Or perhaps we might say about awakening the hope that's already there, but it's dormant in us, lost. For me, that's what makes our flaming chalice such an appropriate symbol for our UU faith. It's not just an image of a flame, it's about actively fanning into flame the embers of hope that are already there. It invites us to bring them alight with meaning and the experience of community. I think the church is all about hope, whether it's symbolized in resurrection after death on a cross or in deepened human connection. As we come together feeling each other's presence, pray and sing together, we begin to experience resurrection. It isn't always dramatic. Perhaps it's more often gradual, but it's real. Spong writes, that risen Christ was real. I cannot say it too emphatically. He was not resuscitated. He was resurrected. He was changed. It was not the limited physical eyes of our humanity that saw him, but eyes of faith, newly opened by the power of his life. But those newly opened eyes really saw him. This was no vision, no hallucination. Resurrection cannot be explained or narrated. It can only be experienced and proclaimed. Death cannot contain him. He lives. And Spong continues, as he says, for Peter, this was the first Easter moment. No bodily resurrection, no resuscitation, not even an empty tomb. Rather, we see a profound reversal of the disciples' inner framework of life, an experience of awakening with new eyes, seeing the world in a new way. It's true that for us, this idea of resurrection can meet resistance. Proud of our commitment to a life of reason, we can come across as doubting Thomases. Thomas, you know, was the disciple who declared after the crucifixion, as Jesus made a post-crucifixion appearance to the disciples, unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, I will not believe. Might we perhaps see Thomas as the world's first Unitarian? Certainly we can learn from his insistence on rational thinking, as we demand that words make literal sense. Like theological fundamentalists, we too have trouble with ambiguity. But what we must learn is not to reject these theological statements just because they don't make literal sense. We can be rationalists and still look for metaphorical meanings. After all, theology is necessarily explained in metaphors. It's all about metaphors. Jesus isn't really a shepherd. We aren't really sheep. Walking with Jesus is like having a shepherd to guide us. Ultimately, theology is all about metaphorical meanings. But really, we need to be more like Peter, not Thomas. We need to open our eyes to see not just the body of Jesus hanging lifeless on a cross. The Easter season invites us to open our eyes to the hope that the story of Jesus' life can awaken in us, come to life in us, as we see Jesus in a new way. Then we're no longer talking just about the resurrection of the body of Jesus. We're talking about the resurrection of our own hearts, as we experience the transforming power of love. We're talking about the vulnerability of the love that lives in us. But if we experience that love as God's love, we're talking about the vulnerability of the God that lives in our own hearts, the resurrection of that love. Resurrection, Spong concludes, reveals my ultimate destiny and yours. It's nothing less than the fullness of life which flows into eternity, in Spong's words. It was the secret of Jesus' life, and it can be the secret of ours as we find it. Our hope, he writes, lies in risking all, in the gamble, the reckless gamble of loving vulnerability, and discovering at life's center the secret that opens doors to timelessness, fullness, perfect love, heaven. That's what we preach on Sunday mornings, especially this Easter Sunday. We're hoping together to experience an Easter moment in our own lives. A moment we can experience not just at Easter, but on any day we find the courage to open ourselves to the vulnerability of love. May it be so this Easter Sunday and throughout the year, throughout our lives.
As we begin to close our service together today, would you please join with me in our unison response as we extinguish our chalices? We extinguish these flames, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment.
Easter is not just a day on the calendar, not just a ritual celebration. It's an invitation to emerge from the coffin of our ordinary lives and come alive again. In that sense, it really is about raising the dead and finding new life as we invite the holy, the spirit of life, God, if you will, into our lives. I invite us as we go back out into the world this Easter Sunday to do so in the spirit of these familiar words by the poet E.E. Cummings. I thank you, God, for most this amazing day, for the leaping greenly spirits of trees and the blue true dream of sky, for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. I who have died am alive again today, and this is the sun's birthday. This is the birthday of life and of love and wings and of the gay, great, illimitably earth. How should tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, breathing, any lifted from the no of all nothing, human being, merely human being, doubt, unimaginable, you. And now the ears of my ears awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are open. It's our custom to close our services with the song Safe Passage, and let us do so now. Why don't we stand as we do it?